So I want to continue with some of these prophecies. I've mentioned a few of them already in different segments, but with maybe just a scriptural reference instead of reading it and so forth. And I want to lock these down because it's going to show a progression and an overall picture of the house of Israel. Okay, so the first one I want to dig into is in Genesis 18. It's verse 18, and this is one of the unconditional promises that God has made to Abraham. Okay, now this isn't the place where he's promising to him, but he's talking about the promise to Abraham. It says, "Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation," a great and mighty nation, "and all the nations of the earth," this isn't 2,000 years ago, okay? This is today, "shall be blessed in him." Okay? Now I have to expand mighty nation into what we already know is many nations and many kings. You remember that promise coming out of him? Say, a great nation, a world empire could be called a great nation. Okay, the British Empire, Britain could be called a great nation because of the British Empire. Okay, it has to split out to that. Okay, and then the second confirmation to that, it's not the only one around, but the only one I'm going to read, is in Deuteronomy 4. Deuteronomy 4. Now, just to know who he's talking about, verse 1, he says, "Now therefore hearken, O Israel, unto the statutes and unto the judgments which I teach you." Okay? We're talking to Israel. Okay? Now this carries over into the whole 12-tribe house of Israel. Okay, he doesn't say house of Israel, he said just Israel. And it applies to all 12 tribes. But what we want to look at is the great nation thing, and that's in 7 and 8. Okay, he says, you're going to keep my statutes and so forth. Keep therefore, do, verse 6. Verse 6, "For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear of these statutes and say," these nations will say, "Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great who hath God so near unto them? And as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for. And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I have set before you this day?" Great nation, okay? Israel is going to be a great nation. And after the Babylonian captivity, they never were a great nation. You know, who was a great nation then? God's not a liar. The house of Israel was the great nation, right? Okay, now we want to go to Hosea. Going to be a great nation. Okay, what about this great nation? Remember, Hosea was told to marry a whore, okay, Gomer, and have kids by her as a flannel board Sunday school exercise lesson to show how God feels toward the house of Israel and what's going to happen to them in a general 1,000, 2,000 year history. Okay? Remember, he said he's going to have, because he says go marry a whore, because God feels like he's married to a whore. because he always uses sexual kinds of stuff and unfaithful marriage and that kind of thing to define idol worship. And that's what the house of Israel did right away. They're gone. You know, as soon as the split happened, they were worshiping idols up there. So God felt like he was married to a whore, you know. And then he says, have 3 kids by her. And there's the first one, the names of the kids will tell what's going to happen. The first one is called Jezreel, and that means the kid will be scattered, the house of Israel will be scattered all over the place. Okay. The second one is Lo Ruhama, Lo meaning no or not, without, and Ruhama is mercy. Okay. The house of Israel, they're going to be scattered all over the place, but they won't have my mercy. Okay. And the third kid is called Lo, no, Ami. Ami is friend, person, you know. Bon Ami, good for your sink, good friend of your sink. Okay. Lo Ami, and that's the one we're going to focus on right here. Chapter 1, verse 9 and 10. Then said God, call his name, the third child, Lo Ami, for ye are not my people. You're going to know who you are. And you remember we did a whole segment just on Hosea and the whore. Okay? They're going to lose their identity. And yet, and we'll get back to this twice, and yet the number of the children, verse 10, of Israel, that shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered or measured, and it shall come to pass in that place. The important part there is the qualification that when they become such a world population group, and there's 1 billion of them, this is going to happen. It will come to pass that in the place where it was said to them, ye are not my people, that place there where they were scattered to, and nobody knew they were God's people. But in that place, the people around them would call them, it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Not Buddha, not Confucius, not Muhammad, not the living God. Sons of the living God. Well, what could they possibly be doing, this house of Israel, these 1 billion people, what could they possibly be doing that other people around them would say, you're the sons of the living God? They'd be connecting to God somehow, wouldn't they? With the Bible and the British and American Bible societies with all their missionaries going all over the world and every place. Okay, Hosea. Okay, so they're going to lose their identity. Another place that's kind of off to the side, but says the same thing, is in Romans 11. Romans 11. We're going to jump around a little bit. Mainly, we're going to concentrate on 1 through 7, and then verse 25 is one of the main parts there. Just so you know, he says, God said, I say then, Paul says, I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. No, God keeps people back. Remember, Elijah had 7,000 and so forth, he says, and then in verse 5 he says, even so, just like that, at this present time, also there is a remnant according to the election of grace. God hasn't cast away his people. There's this remnant out there someplace, and they're getting in by election. Whereas the Jews didn't figure that they got in by election. They were already chosen. They were just chosen. These people. And then in verse 7, after he talks about grace and works and stuff, he says, what then? Israel, and he's not talking about the house of Israel. He didn't say the house of Israel. He's talking about geographical Israel right now, the Jews of his time. because his whole book of Romans is a treatise of Christianity and how it relates to the Jews, to the royal house at Rome. Caractacus, the British king, second cousin to Paul. That's who he's writing to, and he's telling how the lost tribes, the people of Israel but aren't Israel, that's what Jesus says. Everybody here isn't of Israel, the people in the land. How those people that are away by election will make it in. See? What then? Israel hath not obtained. The Jews have not obtained that which he seeks for. Contact with God, salvation, whatever. They didn't get that. Another place he says they didn't have a faith. They didn't have the faith to do it. But here he says, but the election hath obtained it. The election. And the rest, not the election, have all of Israel. We have Israel, geographical Israel, the Jews, and the election. And the election made it, but the rest, outside of the election, were blinded. Well, that's what the King James says, blinded. But in the margin, it's even a bad translation because they put it even in the margin. You don't even have to look it up in Strong's. It says hardness. Hardness. Like God and Pharaoh when he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay? He hardened Pharaoh's heart. He hardened these other people, and they rejected Jesus, didn't they? They rejected him. Okay? So now he's going to go on to say, because the election made it in, the Jews were hardened so that they'd reject the information. So that when the lost tribes got into the picture and started being Christians and disseminating God all over the whole world, the Jews, he says in verse 8, wait. No, not 8. Wait a second. Oh no, it's verse 11. Verse 11. He says, salvation has come to the Gentiles for to provoke them, the Jews, to jealousy. Hey, we're the chosen people here. We're God's chosen people. We're the Jews. What are you Christians, you newfound, you guys are deluded. No, the Jews are where it's at. They'd be jealous of the Christians. Sure. Okay? But now we go to verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that ye be ignorant of this mystery, the Jews and being asleep and all that stuff, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part, hardness, same word, hardness in part, has happened to Israel, the Jews, Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. The lost tribes are going to go away. They're going to get on Christ. They're going to disseminate God and Christ to the whole world. And when that time is fulfilled, then the Jews will be brought back in. Oh, I guess Jesus was the Messiah. Well, okay. And then the gathering of all 12 tribes will happen and the millennial will go on. Okay, we want to go back to Hosea. Okay? Because, wait a second, I'm losing my places here. We'll go back to Hosea because I want to reiterate this because it follows right in with what we just said, right? The number of the children of Israel should be the sand in the sea. 1 billion Israelites, Christians, and they'll be known as the people of God, the sons of the living God. The whole world knows that the Christians are the sons of the living God of the Bible. Okay? Confirmation. Okay, but now we're going to go to Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43. Do we have a whole bunch of stuff to do there? 8 through 12. 8 through 12. Why are these people going to be known as the sons of the living God? He says what they're going to do right here. He says, you Israel, okay, verse 1, he says, but now thus saith the Lord that created thee, O Jacob, and that formed thee, O Israel. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You're going to this and that and the other thing. And then verse 8, bring forth the blind people that have eyes, those who were blinded, those who were hardened, the blind people that have eyes, and the deaf that have ears. Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the people be assembled, who among them can declare this and show us former things. Let them bring forth their witnesses. Gather everybody together and bring some witnesses out here, that they may just be justified, or let them hear and say, it is the truth. Ye are my witnesses. God talking. Saith the Lord. Ye are my witnesses, and my servant, whom I have chosen, that ye may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there is no God formed, neither shall there be after me. I, even I, am the Lord, and beside me there is no Savior. And then he witnesses again. That's 3 times. 3 times. I have declared and have saved, and I have showed when there was no strange God among you. Therefore ye are my witnesses, saith the Lord, and I am your God. These people are going to witness to God. The Chinese didn't do that. Muslims don't do that. See? Not the God of the Bible. Well, Allah, the moon god. Okay. Witnesses. These are going to be witnesses, right? A great mighty nation who doesn't even know who they are going to be called the sons of the living God because of the way they witness, what they witness to. Let's go over to Isaiah 49 and see something that's going to happen to these witnesses. Okay? Just so we know who he's talking to. Remember, we talked a lot about the isles afar off. Keep silent before me, O isles, and let the people renew their strength. Verse 149, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken to me, you people from afar. Britain's pretty far from Israel. Skip down to verse 3. And he said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel. He's talking to the isles. And the isles said, God called me Israel. That's what he says here. Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Okay, now we know who he's talking to. Went through, raise up the tribes, and thus 40, on 1 through 7, huh? Okay. I had labored in my strength, verse 5, to bring Jacob again unto him. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorified in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. Israel talking. Oh, that's Isaiah. Okay, never mind. And he said, verse 6, it is a light thing that thou shouldst be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved. What does that mean? Preserved. The desolations is the proper translation. Okay? Those people who were desolated, They're gone, scattered. They lost their kingdom. That's the U.S. and Britain, right? And restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee a light, for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayst be my salvation unto the end of the earth. See? Who is that? Well, we're just about to land in 53 with Jesus. That's Jesus. God's going to give Jesus to be a light to the Gentiles and the preserved of Israel. Isn't that neat? 19 and 20. That's where we want to focus, 19 and 20, because 19 and 20, it talks about the United States, a small part of the house of Israel that went over, okay? He said, for thy, who is he talking to? 49. We're still in 49. Who's he talking to? The isles. He's talking to the isles. O Israel, the house of Israel. For thy, house of Israel, waste and thy desolate places, over there in geographical Israel, where they got conquered and lost their kingdom and everything, and now it's desolate and waste, okay? And the land of thy destruction, they destroyed that kingdom over there, done, shall even now be too narrow for the reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallowed thee up shall be far away. Who swallowed them up? Well, everybody through history, the Egyptians and the Babylonians and the first Babylonians and the Assyrians, right? The Assyrians. Okay? But mainly the Assyrians were conquered and they took them away, as we already know. And what does it say at the end of it? It says, they that swallowed thee up will be far away. Well, he's not talking about geographical Israel here, because their enemies are all around them. They've been all around them ever since they've been there, right? But, verse 20, the children which thou shalt have, house of Israel, is going to have children. Well, that's the British Empire, right? The company of nations. The children of the house of Israel, the children of Ephraim, the headquarters tribe of the house of Israel, the British Empire. One of those kids is going to get lost. It says this, and the children that thou shalt have after thou hast lost the other. We see this, it's such a bare bones prophecy that it's hard to understand unless you put it into the big context. See? The other children of the British Empire, after the British Empire loses one of their children, those children that are left are going to say, wait a minute, this place is too straight for me. I want to have my own place. That's what he's saying here. After thou hast lost the other, those children shall say again in thine ears, this place is too straight for me. Give place to me that I may dwell. I want my own place. It's the breakup of the British Empire. First the United States takes off, and now the other guys say, well, wait a minute, Canada doesn't belong to the British Empire anymore. On paper. Okay, I know about that. See? It's a commonwealth. The commonwealth. So they're going to lose the United States. United States, that's not the only place that we find United States in there. I'm pretty sure we get to that in another segment. It's a pretty detailed prophecy that can't be anything but the United States. So, but 19 and 20 then says that the house of Israel, this great nation who doesn't really know even who they are, who are witnessing, about God. I mean, the Bible and God were big time stuff in 1776. This isn't just at the beginning of things. Remember, we talked about the British Empire blossoming in 1800 after the 29th chapter of Acts gets discovered. So this is fairly recent history, a couple hundred years ago. Okay? They're going to lose one of their colonies. Okay? But the last prophecy we want to look at is David. David, because that figures into this. How are you going to find the lost tribes? Well, you're going to have to pick out all these different prophecies and see how they apply to people today. And if God isn't a liar, then Britain is who these people are. But now I got a little bit of a problem, because David has a prophecy. Where is that? 377. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 7. 2 Samuel 7. Just by way of background, David says, well, we're doing pretty good here. He's been king for, who knows? I mean, he's not a young man anymore. Right? So he ruled for 40 years, brought the whole nation together, was at peace, no enemies, no wars, no nothing. I mean, this is way down later on in his reign. And he says, I want to do something for God here. I want to build a house. Instead of having him be in a tent, I want to build him a house. And Nathan the prophet says, oh, okay, good deal. Go ahead and do that. But God talks to Nathan, and he says, I won't do that. No. So Nathan comes back and he says, David, I'm sorry, oops. But he prophesies some other stuff that's what we want to zero in on, see? But that's the context, okay? So he comes back and he says, David, you can't build the thing because you got a lot of blood on your hands, but Solomon will build it. Your son will build it. But, and this is again an unconditional promise. He doesn't say, if you do the right thing, if you be a good boy, I'm going to, no. Like he did with Jeroboam. You be like David, do the thing right. No. He says, well, you can build a house and all that, and verse 9 is where we'll start. And as I was with thee, whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of great men that are in the earth. I did all that for you. Moreover, I did a lot of good stuff for you, but additionally, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. Well, now how does that make sense for David in Israel with maybe 35 years of total peace? Who's thinking about moving? Move where? This is the place where we live, and this is our kingdom, and everything's fine, and, the crops are good, and we're having a good time here. I mean, we're not going to move. We can plant me someplace else, and our enemies are going to be far away. I mean, we don't have any enemies. They're all, giving tribute to us every year. It doesn't make any sense in that context. But when you say the house of Israel, which is the major portion of the 12 tribes, 5-6 million of them to begin with, and now 1 billion of them, as opposed to maybe 30 million Jews in the world, the house of Israel, Northwest Europe, the British Isles, they will be, that's where we're going to plant them. We're going to move Israel to a place, they'll plant them over there, and they'll never move from then on. And they haven't. It's been there the whole time. And their enemies will be far away, way down there in Israel. The Assyrians and the Egyptians and the Babylonians. And no more enemies up there, you know, except tribal. But that's not really what we want to focus on, okay? So then verse 11 is where we're going to really concentrate here. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over the people of Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord telleth thee, Nathan saying, the Lord says, telleth thee that he will make thee an house. My margin says dynasty. Ooh, dynasty. His bloodline is going to go down through history. There'll always be a man on the throne of David. It's another places where it says that. And when the days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. And he shall build a house for me, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Forever. Who is that? That's Solomon, right? Solomon's going to build the temple, and I'll establish his kingdom, and I'll establish his throne forever. Whoa. Forever? Well, 9 to 13. Forever. We have to talk about throne, don't we? Throne. Is that the seat that Solomon sat on when he judged and said, cut that baby in half? No, that's not it. It's not the actual place where he sat. It's the position of rulership. The presidency shall not be removed until, right? The ruling position of David and Solomon will last forever. That's what it says here, right? Now, and just so we have confirmation, God repeats himself. 16. And thine house, David, thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. Whoa. Now we got a problem. Maybe. We have a problem. God doesn't have any problem. What he said here is that today, right today, as you're listening to this, there's going to be the representation of the throne, the position, the ruling position of David in existence, with someone out of his bloodline sitting on that throne, taking up the position of rulership over Israelites. Jacob said, Judah gets to be king. He didn't say Judah could get to be king of only the Jews, only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, the house of Judah. He said you can rule the whole family. You rule the whole family. And when Judah died and Joseph died, some descendant of Zara, if not Zara himself, because I don't think it was him, he was too late for that, but some descendant of Zara, which is Judah's firstborn, in other words, now Judah takes up the rulership of Egypt. Okay? And just as that happened then, today, the ruling position over Israelites in big nation groups and so forth will be found to be of the line of David. That's hard to accept. Because now we have to say Queen Elizabeth is out of the line of David. Oh, come on. Yeah. Has to be, or God's a liar. He says right here, your throne and your kingdom, your throne, your bloodline, all of that will down through history forever. Whew. Wow. Well, a lot of people say Queen Elizabeth, she's not the rightful heir to the throne. She doesn't belong on the throne. Not her. She's out of the wrong family. The bloodline families of England and Britain that go back in history all come down. She's not in there. She is not the true monarch of England. Now, just by way of example, I got an email not very long ago, just a few, 3-4 days ago, from someone from Britain, I'm sure, who said just exactly that. He said, well, I like your website, but you got some errors there. You know, Queen Elizabeth. And then he went on to talk about it and detail that out. So I replied to him, but instead of bottom lining him and saying, no, this is the way it is, I put together a small essay as part of my reply, and that's what I want to read to you, okay? It's not very long. I said to him, there's a major roadblock that has been inserted into the teaching of the lost tribes. Basically stated, that's one roadblock, it's a major one though. Basically stated, it's the fact that the Queen of the United Kingdom is not the rightful heir to the throne. If this turns out to be true, then a large amount of the lost tribes' teaching is false, or mistaken, or unfounded, but whatever, not true. Not reliable information. That's true. There's an awful lot of information there that gets thrown out. Eh? This idea has very well accomplished a division between the researchers on the beginning levels of research. Turned some people completely off. Someone just starting out to learn about God's hand in history of the Israelites can be pulled off the track. The separation, division, is perfectly reasonable when one considers the result of the teaching. The lost tribes' teaching is the most solid, the most verifiable, the easiest way to prove God's reality. I keep telling you that, you know, and therefore his faithfulness to keep his word to us individuals. He's promised us promised us a lot of great stuff in the Bible. But if we don't have a true belief in God and his faithfulness, then we won't have the strength to act based on his promise against the negative circumstances that we encounter. We won't have the strength to faith. That's faith with an E on the end of it, which makes it a verb. Faith is a verb. In English and Hebrew, in Greek and Hebrew, it's a verb. Okay? All three definitions for faith in Hebrew are verbs. And, quote, without faith, it's impossible to please him, as Paul tells us. Our salvation depends on our actions based on the faith in God's word on the subject. Okay? Right. That's how we get saved, by acting in faith. And you don't act in faith unless you have a good solid belief. Well, wouldn't such an important study be discouraged by the devil? He's the master of division, right? You know, divide and conquer. There are numerous little niches of discord sown into the lost tribes study. A good but common example of the stumbling stone was sent to me by email. I was going to post this on my website, so that's why the difference in tense there. And let me say right away that this writer, what he says is perfectly true, but irrelevant. Irrelevant. See, he's saying the queen shouldn't be there, and this is why. And I agree. But it's irrelevant why he says so. Your website is very interesting, but with some errors. Now, don't bump too much and dwell on some of his grammatical errors here. I'm not going to change his wording. Do you know that a king loses all authority and power to govern if he has fallen from faith? No, I didn't know that. The House of Windsor, who is the origin, the House Hanover, Hessen, Coburg, Saxon, Sachsen, is not the real royal family of England. In the Tudor lineage, there came a bastard on the throne from this line Henry VIII came from. He was not eligible to occupy the throne of England because of the named fact, because he came from the wrong house. Right? The real monarch came from the from the Hastings family, and he lives now in Australia. I've seen a YouTube. Supposed to be the king of England. I saw the guy talk about it. Okay. Furthermore, if a monarch lost faith, he will lose all the power and authority to continue his reign. This similar rule acts when a person claims to be a pope when he is not a member of the church. Think about Nebuchadnezzar. God ceased his reign until he converted and claimed back the throne. But we have a papal bull which states that a person who is fallen from the faith will lose the power and authority and will not get back this when he or she came back to the true faith. These grace ceases forever. Insofar, England has no valid monarch, because there is no true Catholic nobleman in England yet. Please consider this on your website. This fact will be very important to the future of England when God punishes this nation for their sins against the faith and his holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Heavy stuff. There are more than a few comments. That's the end of his email. But and there are more than a few comments that can be made on this. As you saw, my eyebrows go up a few times. But I will only address the main one. The Queen has no right to rule. This is what I said. I said, thanks for stopping by. I have heard your argument many times over the years and appreciate you taking the time to go over it. Although I haven't really researched this myself, I have listened to experts, people I trusted, and based on other research that touched this subject, I believe that Her Majesty is probably not entitled to the throne. And doesn't her blood tie go back to Count Vlad? That's Dracula. Look it up. But we can't judge an apple with an orange. We must only look at the fact that they are both fruit. Okay? They're different. See? That's the fact that ties the two together. Okay? And overriding the fact that they are different. Okay? Regardless of the true right of those who rule, whether they be of the right house or not, there is an overriding fact, just like the fruit, that must, and that's all capitals, must be considered. That fact is God's promise unconditionally to David that we just talked about, right? That overrides the fact of them not being from the right house or not. God didn't say, I said, here's a list of attributes that God did not include when he promised David that the Israelites would always be ruled over by one of David's descendants. Now, we just read that promise, didn't we? That prophecy, okay? See if he said any of this stuff. God didn't say the king would be just and compassionate. I didn't read that. God didn't say the king would never be corrupted. God didn't say the king must be a believer. I mean, if the king goes to paganism, then all his good stuff and blessing is out the window? He doesn't get out of that? I don't think so. I mean, Solomon went way into paganism, didn't he? Yeah? He didn't lose the crown. You know, he died an old man at peace and all that. He didn't lose his promise. The king didn't say he would protect his subjects. God didn't say that. Okay? God didn't say that the king would rule according to God's commandments, even. And lastly, God didn't say that the king would not worship the devil and eat babies on Halloween. Here's a list of the things that God did promise. God did say, the king would have blood ties to David. That's the end of the list. That's the end of the list. There'd be a king, and he'll have blood ties to David. I didn't see anything else in there, did you? Huh? And there isn't anything else, anyplace else. It just said, you're going to be the king, and you'll be from David. Period. It's the end of the list. So we have a choice to make. We can decide that God tells the truth, or we can decide that God is either a liar or unable to keep his word. He said this is going to happen, but, you know, if God told the truth and can and does keep his word, then nothing else matters except that any, all capitals, any royalty or president, and maybe even prime minister, president, ruling over Israelites can trace their bloodline back to David. I mean, most any of the European royalty one can name can trace their lineage back to Yoked and Teotephi. Yeah, because they all sprung, all of those lines of royalty all sprung out of Ireland, starting in 580 BC, when Jeremiah brings Teotephi to Ireland and marries her to the High King of Ireland, Yoked. Well, Yoked was a Milesian. He was out of the tribe of Judah, but he wasn't through the line of Pharez, or through the line of Pharez. Yes, he was through the line of Zara. He was ruling, Judah will rule, but he wasn't through the line of David. The Pharez line supplied David. These guys, the Milesians, as I've said many times, they left Egypt early, before Moses in the Exodus. The Zara line was, for all intents and purposes, gone. And the only Judah line that was left in Egypt was the Pharez line. They came out of Egypt, went down the line through the generations till David, out of Pharez, David, and then all the way through to Zedekiah. And the daughter of Zedekiah that Jeremiah took, Teotephi, to Ireland was off the Pharez line out of David. So Judah can rule, but David's got to be in there too. according to what David promised. I mean, David was promised by God. So the line of David through Teotephi gets married to the line of Judah through Zara. The lines come together, and now we have all Judah, and out of them spring all the royalty. Okay, that's the background. I have also read that some of the powers that be openly claim their descendant from David. And if I recall, that's one of the parts of the divine right of kings idea. Well, we're descended from David, so we have the divine right of kings. God said, David on the throne. This is why Jeremiah's trip to Ireland is so important. A lot of folks will tell you that Jeremiah never went to Ireland. And it's really hard to prove. Really, really hard to prove. It's all circumstantial, except for one rock face. And we'll get into that. One of the other 12 or 13 segments to come. All the Judahite kings that were across the North Mediterranean weren't out of the line of Pharez, like David was. They were from the line of Zara, emanating out of Egypt before the Exodus with Moses. David's line had, capital H-A-D, had to be interjected into the royalty stream of Europe and the Isles to govern the lost tribes when they showed up 300-400 years later. Okay? Now Brutus, the founder of New Troy, that was London, in 1100 BC, I mentioned that already in another segment, Brutus was not qualified. Well, wait a minute, he was out of the line of Judah, he was king, he was the son of the king of the Trojans and everything, was not qualified to rule Israelites. Only his own Trojan Judahite brethren. Why not? Because he wasn't out of the line of David. He wasn't out of the line of David. See, when all the lost tribes shows up, if the lost tribes had showed up in 1000 BC, maybe Brutus' descendant down there after 100 years would still be the king and he'd rule over them. See? But he wasn't from the line of David. See? And David was supposed to rule. Okay? Is the Queen the rightful heir of the British throne? If she can trace back to David, all capitals, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. Nothing. Okay? God only sees David, the apple of his eye. Right? So we've got this huge number of people that are going to become a great, in the whole world, a great nation, world empire. And they won't even know who they are. They won't know who they are, but they will be witnessing about God to the point that all the people around them are going to say, they're the sons of the living God. Wow. And look there. One of them split off from the empire. And between the two of them, the American and the British Bible Societies, they got the Word of God out to the whole world. Wow. And a son of David, just to prove God true, God faithful to his word, a son of David, out of David's line back 3,000 years later. David was 1000 BC. 3,000 years later, somebody on the throne would be a line of David. Now, how can you or anybody take just those 6 little prophecy events that we talked about today and lay those on anybody else in history? Anybody else? You can't. You absolutely can't. It's got to be true. Queen Elizabeth is out of the line of David. I have a huge chart made up by Queen Victoria for £1 million back in her time, a couple hundred years ago, that shows her bloodline all the way back to Judah. It doesn't even stop at David, it goes all the way back to Judah. Don't you know it has to? It has to. I don't care how much you want to doubt or deny, it has to. Because if it doesn't have to, throw the Bible out. You can't trust God. He's given all these prophecies and told everybody what they're going to do, and it didn't come true. You remember Ingersoll I mentioned in one of the big other segments? Big-time British atheist. He did a lot of study. He said, you can't believe the Bible. It's not true. All of the promises and all the good stuff that God said he'd give to the Jews, he didn't give it to them. He gave it to Britain. It's because they're the house of Israel. They got the birthright. Okay? You can't lay that on anybody else. It's got to be true. See? And if it's true, God is real. God is real. And you can trust all the stuff he says about your individual life. You know? All you have to do is act in faith. Just trust what he says about the decision that you're about to make. Okay? And if you're buying a candy bar, do it to suit yourself. Okay? Don't ask God what he would do about buying this Snickers bar. You don't have to do that. But if you're going to do something big, some heavy life change, some lifestyle change, like quitting idol worship, tithing on a regular basis for the rest of your life, using 25% of all of your time, effort, energy, money, resources, whatever, to help God do what he is about to do, what he's trying to do. Buying a house, buying a car, going to a certain kind of a church. Lifestyle changes don't come easy. And there are lots of options when you have a lifestyle change. But basically you have two options to make. Two options, that's all you get. You can choose to do whatever it is you are deciding to do. To help yourself, to choose to be safe, to choose your pleasure, your financial security, whatever your comfort, your survival, anything to self-interest. You can choose that. There'll be a lot of different things, or you can choose what God would say on the subject. And boy, don't you know that the God option is usually always the hardest one. It's almost always the hardest one, because it's risky. And that's what faith is. It's a risk. See, there's no risk, there's no faith. Again, faithing is a verb. It's an action based on something God has told you about this situation. Whew. You got to have a really, really strong belief in God, to give away a bunch of your money, to change your lifestyle, to leave your family, leave your job, maybe. Heavy stuff. You don't do that. You got to be like the Christians in the circus with the lions. See? You got to be so sure that there's a God that dying, it's not a big deal. You don't have to die. There's life after death, no big problem. You act in faith. Okay? And the lost tribes, as I've said and will say over again, the lost tribes is the way to do that. Boy, you get into these lost tribes study and you got to do your own homework with this stuff. You've got all of the references now. Go back and read all this stuff for yourself. and maybe the other 200 promises to the house of Israel, and see all of them came true, except the ones that are about the gathering down in the millennial times. And when you know God is real, like the sun will come up in the morning, then all this other stuff falls right into place, and you have peace of mind. Peace of mind. Whoa, man. There's nothing like it. Right? Lost tribes. Okay, this isn't the end of all the prophecies, but there'll be another segment down the line, and we'll talk about more prophecies as they come up. There's a lot more. But thanks a lot for watching this time. God bless.